Before the Truist Championship, no one was aware of Sepp Straka. In an area full with fan favorites such as Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, and even the Austrian-American Rory McIlroy entered the course in silence, with little to no outside pressure or expectation. Straka was getting ready for something that no one could see coming, while others were enjoying the attention. Let's face it, how recently did you see his name trending prior to Sunday? That's right, this is much more unbelievable because of that. However, a deeper inspection would reveal something simmering under the surface. It had been seething Straka. One stroke at a time, he had been steady, systematic, and gaining confidence. He wasn't only there to take part. No, this was a guy who was simply waiting for the ideal opportunity to attack. And that time was now, as we would soon discover. The enormity of the event is what makes this so crazy. The most genuine championship isn't only a pointless competition. One of the PGA Tour's hallmark tournaments, it's a seismic move. The largest FedEx Cup points are up for grabs, along with prominent names and more pressure. This kind of competition is what establishes traditions. And while everyone was focused on Fleetwood's steadiness or McIlroy's comeback story, Straka snuck between the gaps and made a huge difference. He really changed our perception of what we understood about this season in only 4 rounds. Here, every shot was more important. A player might lose not just a victory but also Ryder Cup standing, sponsor leverage, and rankings that last long into 2026 with every missed putt, clipped wedge, and hesitancy. This has to do with professional direction, not simply pride. And most fans didn't think Sepp Straka would win in that high-stakes venue. However, golf creates its own scripts rather than following them. This is where things get even more intriguing. Rory McIlroy recognized the profound change that Straka's victory brought around, telling Ryder Cup selectors that he can no longer be disregarded, according to Golf Digest. You know you've accomplished something significant when Rory begins advocating on your behalf. And whether you like him or not, McIlroy doesn't give out accolades easily, so this wasn't simply a decent round. Just that ought to cause you to pause and reflect. This wasn't simply a nice round, you see. It was more than simply a steamy Sunday. Some of the most well-known players in the game were caught off guard by this calculating, cool run. The frightening thing is that it didn't seem forced at all. Even if the rest of the golf world was unaware of this, Straka played with the composure of a guy who did. Straka made the decision to personalize it, just as it seemed like everything was starting to take shape according to the standard top-tier script. One putt, one swing, and one flawless tempo at a time. However, how did he really do it? When did a respectable performance turn into a victory that defined a career? This tale really heats up when the tournament completely flipped on its head. So let's examine that time. On the back 9, everything changed. Straka had been stable, clean, solid, and accessible until that moment. However, nobody anticipated that he would illuminate the course in the manner that he did. Until the 13th, that is. One birdie, one hole. Abruptly, the discourse around Straka began to change. From, he's hanging in there, to wait a minute, to, this guy is coming. The pundits changed their tone. C was subtly tuning in to something lethal, something unique, in a tournament that wasn't simply another round with gaudy names and highlight reels. You couldn't fake that type of rhythm. He was not rushing. He wasn't fortunate. He was surgically accurate. The tone was established with the 13th hole birdie, but things began to seem inevitable at 14 and 16. When a long iron was turned into a tight pin on 16, the audience began to mumble rather than applaud. That kind of sound only occurs when a player is doing an almost supernatural action. Pure poetry was what came next. A putt straight out of a textbook that rolled with the perfect drip speed, according to the PGA Tour. Dead center. Just execution. No drama. This was not your typical back 9 birdie. It was a message. He had no intention of playing about with the leaderboard. He came to take ownership of it. Additionally, Straka was avoiding the same pitfalls that Shane Lowry and Tommy Fleetwood were while he was making the game seem simple. Fleetwood missed 2 easy birdie opportunities. Lowry on 15, the player missed a putt that would have kept him in the game. Granted, Straka was making a few minor errors, but none at all. That's what set him apart. Then came the age of 18. The time. His almost flawless shot on the last hole wasn't enough to guarantee victory. Every person above him on the FedEx Cup board received a message. "I'm not here to invent figures." 5 feet below the hole, a smooth 8-iron crept upward, settled softly, and released just enough. The kind of shot that makes you shiver before it even touches down. And there was just calm concentration as he strolled up the fairway. No fist pump or showmanship. Like a guy who has mentally performed this 1,000 times. Without blinking, he drained the birdie putt. When it counted, straight in the heart. He seized authority at that point and never relinquished it. The camera continued to pan back to Fleetwood and Lowry, who were still grinding. They both understood that the gap was no longer narrowing. It was rapidly increasing. Straka wasn't the only one feeling heated. Straka was erecting a wall between the field and himself at this point. The new name at the top of the scoreboard was not what anybody had anticipated. However, what was the response of the rest of the field? When they realized what had just transpired, how did the locker room atmosphere change? Stay still, because the narrative only gets better from there. You should have been watching the last few holes at the most prestigious event if you've ever wanted to experience what startled stillness on a golf field looks like. Because not only the audience was in a state of stunned silence as Sepp Straka stood there coolly, composed and closed. It was the top of the PGA Tour. Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, and even Rory McIlroy. By the end of Sunday, all 3 had a similar trait. They were observing him. And they had to, not because they wanted to. First up is Shane Lowry. The Irishman had spent the whole week playing a crisp round of golf. He played iron well. He was in the hunt, and his putting, which is often streaky, was perfect. The back 9 followed. Lowry had 2 excellent chances to maintain pressure on Straka, but both missed the mark. A lip out on 15. He left the green shaking his head due to the fallout and a misinterpretation on 17. TalkSport claims that Lowry was heard saying to his caddy, "I thought that was in." And that's all. The most painful part of the game is when it disappears without a hitch. Then there was Tommy Fleetwood, who was undoubtedly one of the field's most reliable players. He was moving. He was a birdie. However, what he lacked was sufficient. Tommy had a strong start and pushed through the middle part of the round, but he was unable to catch Sepp. Furthermore, it was already too late when he realized what was going on. On 17, the camera captured him looking at the most recent standings. One moment of hesitancy, one shocked expression. You could see Straka had firmly taken root in their minds at that point. Even Jacob Bridgman, who mounted an unexpectedly powerful drive on Sunday, was unable to take the lead. Everyone on the course was aware of the kind of performance that had just taken place in front of them, so even though he looked pleased and tied for 5th after making a birdie, he was not content, and the one man who was unfazed by it all, Sepp, was unrivaled. But Rory McIlroy's response was perhaps the most revealing. The Sun claims that Rory was quick to commend Straka after the round, saying the victory served as a stark lesson to ardor. Cup selectors. He supported the triumph rather than just applauding it. That is acknowledgement, not just respect. The face of contemporary European golf, Rory, only gives out kind remarks when they have meaning. And there was weight to this one. Sepp Straka didn't simply win the most prestigious title like that. He grabbed it from a pitch full of some of the tour's most dangerous players. It wasn't a coincidence. There was no weather break. It was a clear and decisive victory against names that anticipated dominance. However, now that Straka has surprised the golf community, what does this portend for his future? Is this just the start? It wasn't simply the finish of a golf tournament when Sepp Straka made that last putt on hole 18. It was the beginning of something far more significant. This was not a happy occasion. It wasn't a fairy tale victory. Golf.com claims that this change was a turning point in Straka's career, an instance in which a consistent performer abruptly veered to the left into elite territory. It was evident throughout the transmission. It was evident in the field's body language. Additionally, it was visible on the leaderboard. To be clear, this victory did not just upend the most prestigious title. The Ardor Cup photo looked amazing. Do you recall Rory McIlroy's statement that the European selectors were much reminded of this victory? That wasn't spontaneous. It was a warning, a message. With such power that it reverberated across both circuits, Straka even tossed his hat into the Ryder Cup ring. Not to mention that Rory is well aware of the requirements for competing at that level. Thus, it says a lot for him to effectively endorse Straka. This victory didn't occur by accident. This was a well-planned, large-scale performance. When it comes to Ryder Cup weekend, Europe has always relied on the new hammer style of round. And they may have discovered a new hammer as a result of this performance. The fact that Straka's victory served as a reminder that Europe isn't simply about the typical suspects anymore was noticed even by Golf Digest. Silently, gradually, and with ice in their veins, the next generation is coming. And Straka becomes a member of an exclusive class after this victory. In 2025, just one other guy has won many times while on tour. McIlroy, Rory. That's all. That's the list. Take a moment to consider it. One is a worldwide icon and a potential Hall of Famer. The other was a man who entered the most prestigious tournament as a mid-tier player and left as the competition's newest issue. That represents a change, in narrative, not simply a statistic. Let's also discuss dual tour victories. It wasn't a soft pitch for Straka. He didn't accumulate victories at unimpressive competitions. He has accomplished this on circuits, continents, and now expectations, as he is no longer operating under the radar. Just now, that radar was nuked. Thus, the intensity, the context, and, above all, the degree of respect shift whenever his name appears on a scoreboard these days. He is no longer the person trying to attract attention. He's the one with a track record, a reputation, and a strong argument for important positions on the biggest golf platforms. However, it brings us to the next question, which transforms a significant victory into a more significant tale. What comes next? Is this a straw ceiling or is a full-blown breakthrough season just getting started? We need to know what everyone is thinking now that Sepp Straka has startled the golf community. Was this a moment of inspiration or the beginning of something far more significant? Without a doubt, the golf scene seems a bit different after that performance at the top tournament. The typical suspects remain on the field. Yes, Scheffler, Rahm, and McIlroy, but they're now looking over their shoulders. And guess who's rapidly gaining in their rearview mirror? Yes, Straka. Let's discuss the FedEx Cup. According to the PGA Tour's own estimates, Straka has now officially risen into the top 5 rankings. That isn't a prize for participation. That is a genuine attempt to win the season-long championship. And it's not only theoretical if he maintains this kind of performance, it is feasible. Even though the season is just halfway over, he has already recorded a number of victories. Confidence, drive, and consistency. He satisfies every need for a FedEx Cup threat. This is when things get crazy. He's not even at his peak yet. His skill set is continually developing. Although Straka has already had moments of genius, this time it comes with a fresh coat of gloss, improved decision-making, tighter wedge play, and ice-cold handling of pressure. Those are indications, not flukes. The most significant indication is that he is demonstrating his ability to compete with the world's finest. For him, that's not just good news. Others find it to be a nightmare. What about the majors then? Is there any chance of it happening? Look, men have caught fire before. Gary Woodland, Jimmy Walker, and Danny Willett. Straka, however, feels otherwise. It's more of a slow burn contender than a one-week marvel. Why wouldn't he be a factor at the Open or the PGA Championship if the confidence from this victory carries over into the next events, particularly on courses that value discipline over brute force? There have been more bizarre incidents. Straka has the capability to make a deep run with this new form. For the rest of us, here is where the fun begins. What are the reactions of the other players? Has Straka been added to their list of threats? You wager. In a signature event, you get more than just a trophy once you eliminate a stacked field. You attract notice. Additionally, attentiveness makes a difference. It alters the way other players get ready. It alters the feeling of pairings. When your name appears on the scoreboard, it even alters the Sunday vibe. Straka isn't the underdog anymore. He is a target. This is where we hand it up to you, however, as the fans now own this moment. Do you believe Sepp Straka has just made it into the top division of golf? Or will this run be remembered as a passing fad? Tell us in the comments section below. After doing that, have a look at the video that is now playing on your screen.